Hi there, welcome to the latest discussions in the Presgrove case and what could be a heated moment in regard to the theme of, is Jack Newton, Noah's best friend, the true victim within this case, the only victim, or just one of many? Whilst Mike may have suggested that, Pam Feldman Garrison has given her thoughts on the matter and questioning what's really going on. It's got a little bit tense, and today I'm here to make sense of it all, break it down bit by bit, and highlight the importance of it all. Because if you didn't already know, I've actually done a video on the theme of victims within the case and investigation. And be sure to check them out if you haven't already. For those videos and full coverage on the Presgrove case so you don't miss out on anything and previous, the full playlist is available. Top right corner where the I symbol is up there. You click on the I symbol, you get a drop down menu box with the full playlist and some loose videos underneath that. Just in general, to set the tone for today, I've already done focused videos on the likes of Mikey Lair, who was supposedly dealing with PTSD long before Noah's death and the party, understanding possible causes and effects, and then how it could have acted as a trigger, as in Noah's death, and how it impacted him before, during, and after the party. So Mikey, a victim to something in the past, and quite likely a survivor to it, but carrying the cost and the weight of, and the impact of whatever happened. And then the trigger of Noah's death, being a victim in a sense to witnessing something shocking and possibly traumatic. It is possible, and I'm going to go into depth later as to why it's that way and why it can apply to more than one person. We've done some coverage on Robin Smith as well, one of the victim's family members, who at a certain point in time, a high stressful situation when it was quite raw and early on, how she acted. Robin Smith, the aunt, her mindset, where her mind was at the time and all of that. Done some focus on Jasmine Milan with her mindset and how things change with time and what she's gone through. So it's not just one person. As for the case, leading up to the case, Noah is the one victim, the only victim in that moment from what we know of. But as for the investigation ongoing, and ever since, there have been numerous victims in different ways, both inside of the case and just on the community online. And I'm sure some people that may not label themselves this and that, they'll still go on about how they've been attacked or slandered, they need to sue, they need protection orders, they need this and that. So clearly there have been moments of people in vulnerability or treated, or which could be considered as being on the receiving end and a victim in some way. But because of the Noah Presgrove case and Noah being the one who's supposedly worse off compared to everyone else around, that's why some will only look at it one way and not include the other possibilities. But for that full understanding, I'm here today to enable that, and welcome to those that are present watching. And if you are currently here watching live, feel free to share your thoughts, comments, and just live reactions in general. Located on the right side, the live chat box. And at any point or time, and for those watching on catch up, you're welcome to leave your additional thoughts, theories, whether you agree or not with today, whether you think that Jack Newton is a victim, the main victim, or not at all. And if you've got any questions or answers too, be sure to drop a comment down below under this video. It will help with starting new conversations, discussions, and maybe new ideas and videos. And it will just help with general awareness, as in pushing it out there as for this case and what's being talked about in the moment. So, with that being said, the order of how we'll do it, I'm going to break it down a little bit more today. We're going to look at a summary of what Pam has interpreted from Mike and a bit of a backstory. And then we'll take a little bit of a look at what Mike was saying, and then I'm going to react to it on the spot and then repeat it again with the other few comments made and see where we get. But be sure to stick around later in this video for a bit more of a deeper analytical look into, how Jack could be considered a victim and not just the only victim Without further ado, let's now begin. So this time around, you can find this post on the family run Facebook page, Justice for Noah Presgrove. Not really looked at many posts on here in a while. About a day ago or so, Pam had said, "Today I saw something that I feel is the worst and most disgusting thing I've read since I became involved in Noah's case." Wow. And with what we've already seen and dealt with, if this is considered the worst and most disgusting, then it's got to be shocking, right? Well, let's see. As a quick backstory for reference, Mike Johnson is a profile that has been on another platform for quite some time. Another platform. What's that exactly? Well, I've come across Mike Johnson on my YouTube channel, so maybe that's what Pam's referring to. Not too sure why we've got to be vague or cryptic about where the person operates from, but there we go. Pam then said, he has always sided with the defendants named in the wrongful death lawsuit that was filed on behalf of Noah's family. Mike has claimed to have 25 to 30 years of LE experience and that he lives in the Tulsa area and basically an internet sleuth that has taken interest in this case. However, he's also made claims of knowing information that an unknown LE officer not involved with the case would or should know, and even that he shared various Snapchats with Robin before they were made public. Right. These various Snapchats, are they the ones which we've already seen since? The one of Mikey in bed with Jasmine and Logan, 5:27. The snap at 4:30 after searching for Noah supposedly back at the house with Carter and Logan posing. The one at 2:32 in the morning of Monday earlier of not a snap but just a normal video of Pepe Graham outside with a traffic barrel and Mikey underneath it. I wonder. Pam says, today Mike announced that Jack Newton is the victim in all of this. That the Newton family were Noah's family, even after I corrected him that Noah is the victim in capital letters and not Jack. He doubled down. He responded back that Jack was indeed the victim and didn't even acknowledge that Noah is the victim in all of this. There seems to be a bit of a competition going on indirectly / a debate on who is worse off, and it's quite an interesting situation to be in. Then Pam said, on one hand, Mike wants to say that Jack and Carter are happy and that it's all well deserved, but then turn around and say Jack is the victim and that by the family filing the wrongful death lawsuit and including Jack, that they've somehow ruined Jack's life. I guess that's because with Jack being with Carter and Carter getting pregnant, we've been dragged into the wrongful death lawsuit, which people would say applies to them in a way. Is it going to impact Jack, the father to that baby, when it's brought into this world? Is it going to have negative effects on the stress for Carter Combs when giving birth, and could it go wrong because of all of this that's still ongoing? That's how you could interpret it. He also reinforces the idea that Noah's family just wants money and not answers. Y'all, this is part of the reason I remain vocal and keep advocating for the truth for Noah. There was an obvious campaign to discredit Noah's family and their quest for answers. Now, what I find kind of ironic there is this could be considered towards the dark side and those that defend the defendants. But let's not forget there was a time on the army page when it came to the 1 year anniversary of Noah's death, and you had Vanessa Salazar, you had Tiffany Shepard, there was some disgruntlement between Noah's aunt Robin Smith, partially Ashley Chadwick and Victor Presgrove, that were calling out the army page and Justin back then because there was some inappropriate comments made suggesting that People on the army page and some familiar faces cared more about Noah and that the family, allegedly, weren't doing enough, weren't showing enough grief, and weren't honouring Noah for the 1 year anniversary public enough. But the family were dealing with it in their own way privately, and yet some on the army page were questioning, attacking at the wrong time, at the wrong place towards a grieving family. So instead of suggesting that it could be from Mike, that side, those type of people, let's not forget where it came from previous, which was on the army page, the light side. It can go both ways. Let's not forget, we don't want goldfish mentalities, do we? Beside that, what do we have on there? There's an obvious campaign. They're discrediting who the actual victim is. That's why we need to continue to say Noah's name to remind everyone that Noah is the victim, and sadly, he's not here to defend himself. You'll also notice that Mike Johnson made a threatening innuendo regarding my husband and his occupation. Now, why would a nobody police officer from Tulsa feel the need to threaten my family? Why does he so badly want me to shut up? If he's just an innocent observer, then he shouldn't be so bothered by me stating facts, right? His response went from sounding like a passionate discussion participant to sounding like it was personal. Well, let's see ourselves if we can pick up on any defensiveness, okay? This is the first comment. It appears to be in a comment section of a post or so. Mike to Pam. Pam, you're a nobody, a bored housewife inserting herself deep in a Facebook group. So, all I would say to Mike, and this is just an observation only, this could be considered insulting someone, and with impressionable first sentences, that's what people will remember you for first. So if people interpret the insults being used, whether that be in a childish way, in an inappropriate way, that's all they're going to focus on and not, care or consider what you might have to say about the rest of the stuff. That's why sometimes first impressions are important, even when you've got to put differences aside. If you want to get your point across, try and get it across first before you go all in on calling them out, if that makes sense. There are times where you could be frustrated with an individual, or they're not quite being clear, they're getting on your nerves, they're being a pain, they're being problematic, they're causing you problems, and it's understandable to kind of like pull the trigger, but sometimes you've got to hold fire to get the main point across. So then other people that read it can listen more to you and not the other person, if that makes sense. That's just an observation. Look, this is what has happened with other people in the case. I've given some directions and suggestions. Whether people take it or not, then that's up to them. Mike says, you, Pam, probably signed a non-disclosure agreement and you're now Jan's biatch till the end of time. I didn't read your stupid numbered points. You knew things all along that could have called out Alicia, Caden's mom, but you didn't because family didn't want you to. That says it all. You're just as much of a piece of holding things back, holding the truth back because it will hurt a narrative is despicable. That's what has been going on with this whole case. Family wants money, as in Noah's family, period. Police know plenty, so does family. Well, if the police know a lot and the family do, are they on the same wavelength then? If the family want money and the police are trying to get justice, the family want justice, whether it's for money, is it for justice? And is there a bit of an overlap? They keep the public thinking all these sinister things in hopes of winning a lawsuit, the wrongful death one. I hope Robin Smith plans on helping Madison Rawlings with defence lawyer fees, throw out all the Caden pressy BS and nothing sinister. Some kids drinking. I mean, was it Noah's first time? Likely not. Never drank with his family? Where was his family? Why not keep a better eye on him? Ooh. Oh, I know, he is an adult, that's why. Yeah, 18 and onwards. A tragic accident occurs and his family is trying to benefit off of it. They might have Facebook fooled, but with the whole beating thing, they will be left out of the courtroom. Lawyers got greedy and messed up. You think you're victim's advocate? Well, Noah spent all his time with the Newtons. That was his family too. Jack is a victim. So, just reading it to that point, ending it with Jack is a victim, is a little abrupt based on what was said further up. What was said further up was the situation with Noah, the responsibilities indirectly there. What Noah's family supposedly truly wants, and it's not all for positive reasons based on what Mike interprets. A little bit of a mention and a call out to Pam to begin with. But where does this come back to Jack? Now, of course, we, to some extent, and some people will know more, have seen Jack where he's been questioned and people have given their theories online, and some have used poor choices of words which may have impacted Jack in some way. Maybe that's what Mike is bordering on to. What I've done is I've just noted down some bullet points of interesting lines used just to break it down more and understand what the references are and if it has any links to the past, and that's why it's being driven and portrayed in a particular light. So when it came to the reference of Pam, joining some NDA, signing it, a non-disclosure agreement, and one of Jan's soldiers or something. Well, maybe that kind of links back to the time of when there was that group chat, Facebook Messenger. You remember that screenshot where it came to Jan having a conversation with whoever, calling out Justin Roy and Michael Fazkaz at the time, whether it be joking or being serious about having nothing worth of value to sue them over. A reference to testing the waters with a non-disclosure agreement at the time by labelling Robbie Taylor as Jose, some person within the case, which wasn't true, mistaken identity, but Jan knew that but was doing it as a test to see who she operates with. Would they spill the beans? Would they try leaking that information? I guess it was like a trust test in a way. So I guess that's what the NDA could be in reference to Pam, because previously people have referred to it as the tag team of Jan and Pam, Pam and Jan, and so on and so on. But, on the sideline, as for Jan Fiorillo, I remember them previously when it came to her putting the flyers up, spreading awareness in real life, and also doing some offer. I believe it was willing to assist with legal fees to try and encourage someone to step up and talk, share the actual truth, and be promised safety in return to encourage someone to come forwards. And then based on Jan's language and wording, it could be interpreted that at a point previous, back in 2024, that an individual may or may not have taken up the offer. I believe Jan was careful with her wording, but still, with it being cryptic and breadcrumbs, some would have interpreted it as, oh, well, it looks like this is going somewhere. The truth is going to finally come out. Someone is going to spill the truth, and then there'll be justice and there'll be shocking changes and in a positive direction. But that just didn't happen, did it? And I believe what Jan said, or from how it was inferred from, it was a strategy to try and get someone to actually speak and reach out by possibly faking it and claiming that one has already come forwards. It might make others do the same. It might make other people sweat and panic. A form of psychological warfare to say, we're onto you. A person has broken, and it won't be long till we find out who it links back to and who's responsible. Putting people indirectly on notice. Do you call it a bluff, a double bluff? That it's not really happened, but you're pretending it has, and something is going on in the background to indirectly get other people to panic, to make mistakes, and maybe even confess, possibly, to be treated better. With that paying of legal fees, there's a little bit of persuasive tactics, try and convince people to come on over and share. but it just didn't happen. However, I guess some of the general public that may have not understood the language and wording felt betrayed, or time was wasted, a bit of an emotional roller coaster. So that's another reference to the past, how it could have fueled some frustration towards Jan, how some people may have not quite agreed. See, as for me, the only times I've come across Jan and Pam is when they made false claims about animals and horses and on my bed when I was doing videos. Some thought it was a real horse. I think Pam or Jan thought I had false eyelashes on as well. Some people think I've got an endless supply of dresses as well. I'm closing my eyes for that because that's just, yeah, it says a lot. But that aside, seems like other people may have come off worse or had more conflict with each other over there. Could be partially fueled by what Mike is referring to and indirectly hinting at. But the mention of Pam supposedly knew of Alicia back then before others. What exactly? Knew of Alicia's lies, Alicia's manipulation, changing the narrative, a crossover with Caden Pressey. What Caden Pressey has said with time differs greatly to what Alicia has added on, or when she's spoken on behalf of Caden by saying things Caden has never said, some of which contradicting with what Caden has previously stated in interviews. But if Alicia was doing that, whilst it could harm the case in some way, really the main harm it would be doing under those circumstances, and with the interview being shared by Dropbox to other people online, which was reckless, Alicia would only be causing Caden more unnecessary obstacles. Let's not forget, somewhere, and it's documented on my channel, Caden roughly in his own words said he wished his parents would stay out of it and stop sticking their beaks in and doing all the talking because it's not helping. Right? Just imagine. That's what Caden had actually said at one point. The parents, family, caring, standing up, defending their son, daughter, whoever, that's understandable. But ultimately, Caden, for example, was the one who was at the party. Alicia wasn't. So as for what they know, will be limited. Maybe Alicia may have remembered and noted down more what Caden told her at some point, and ever since Caden's forgotten or a bit confused. But then that opens the possible opportunity and channel for Alicia to misinterpret or for Chinese whispers to occur in relaying what was once said to her by Caden and passing it back on to Caden, but with a different tone, different language and wording used. The story changes slightly, the narrative goes in a different direction, whether it be done intentional or recklessly by accident. It can add more layers, depth and confusion. So when the general public hear what Caden has to say, or more so what Alicia is representing Caden, and then we pick up on what's previously been said by Caden, and in interviews there is a big contrast. So there is confusion, there's a bit of damage, and there's a bit of a mess being caused. But for supposedly Pam to know of that before us, for the family not wanting you, as in Pam, to reveal that or supposedly expose Alicia in a certain light, what does that actually mean at the end of the day? That Noah Presgrove's family is siding with the Pressey family out of genuine belief that Noah was harmed in a form of foul play, darkness, that Caden Pressey's timeline was correct and the victim's family, Noah's family, believes in it, even if they may have not received Caden's phone data and evidence to prove and back that up at some point. Is that what Mike is referring to? And ultimately the reason why supposedly Noah's family would want to side with the Pressey family and what Caden is saying, because overall it will help and push and support the idea of the wrongful death lawsuit and actual justice and consequences being needed, and also a bit of suing on the sideline to gain from it in that sense. Maybe that's what Mike is referring to. I'm just trying to interpret the situation. You may side with people if there's a little bit of biasness, if there's a little bit of relating to one another or what you believe or thinking within the case, and you come across someone else that feels the same way, and they may have just been there physically themselves, but another person's representing them and they come up with slightly different words and lines and little mistakes are made, it's best not to clear it up or set the record straight too much. Just keep it going with the flow. And if it sounds more shocking or bad, even if it's not quite the truth, just let it be, because it might actually help in the long run. Maybe. But if it does come about as lies or misinterpretation, misinformation, exaggeration, and so on, it might actually be counterproductive for Noah's case and point put forwards. So with a wrongful death lawsuit, if it's done correctly and there is a reason and a case behind each one, and defendants, that's understandable. But the wrongful death lawsuit itself is about trying to understand what that is, the magnitude of it, the simplicity of it first, and then what it can lead on to next. And it might have been overhyped in some ways, undervalued in others. And we'll touch upon that shortly. As for supposedly Noah's family wanting money, why exactly? Why do they need money? What would they use it on? I mean, when it came to the reward money, stands till this day, I believe, of $16,000. That's a fair amount. In comparison to maybe other cases, high profile or not, it may differ in amount, but ultimately, putting a price on someone's name can be difficult because not everyone may have the resources, access, or money to be able to put a price on it to encourage people to get eyes on the case. I mean, when it came to the Dylan Rounds case, I believe Candice Cooley, the mother, was willing to put $25,000 up as reward money in the early days, the 30th of May 2022 onwards. However, instead of doing 25,000, I mean, it might have started off at 10,000 or 16,000, then it jumped up to 25, but then the father, Justin Rounds, said, no, let's do it at 50,000. And then it jumped up to, I think, 100,000. And then when Heavy D, the YouTube channel, came involved within the case to do with Idaho, I think they were living or working in Idaho at the time, at crossover and that awareness, they matched that figure. So in the end, it was about $250,000 reward money. In the end, no one got it because it was only Brenner, the killer, and behind bars was the one that had the key to the actual location of where Dylan's remains were to be found out and buried. So yeah, it goes to show that some cases, some people, some families have bigger pockets than others, but it's just how it is. So not everyone will be in the same position. Not everyone will have the same access. It can be difficult. And look, as said, with the videos that I've covered in recent time, when it comes to wealth, when it comes to deeper pockets, it doesn't always have to be in terms of getting the justice and finding closure in that sense. The same situation and struggles can apply to a person who is a victim to something, as a survivor to an event that's quite impactful and negative, and recovering from that, trying to find support or help, but maybe not having quite the right resources or route or mental map or contacts or support system to be able to make the move effectively. So sometimes it leads to taking matters into your own hand, improvising, and it might not be good enough, but it's all you know and all you can work with. So the equivalent with Noah's family, reward money may be considered low compared to other cases, but if that's all they've got, that's all they've got. Is that what encourages the family wanting supposedly money from the wrongful death lawsuit and previous to GoFundMe, as in the private investigators? I mean, Kathy Bingham was doing it pro bono, free of charge. So that could be considered a positive to an extent at one point. But you can let me know whether you agree with Mike or not, as in Noah's family focusing in on the money aspect when it comes to the wrongful death lawsuit. Do I think that's the case? See, this is the key thing. Some people would have been barking and barking at me, wanting answers when it comes to the wrongful death lawsuit, my thoughts on it, the direction of the victim's family and what they want out of it. What I would say is, when it comes to the main goal, the main focus doesn't seem to be about the money. It seems to be about the theme of how people are responsible, and the focus on it mainly being around the hosting and the responsibilities and safeguarding. That seems to be the primary focus, at least from the family's point of view. And the reason why I said how it can be interpreted as overhyped but also undervalued is the direction and the start of it in the first place. So, whilst Mike's comment about, the whole beating situation and claim will be left at or left out in court and with references to the wrongful death lawsuit, but really, when it comes to the aspect of beatdown, attacks, physicality, that was more so suggested by the affirmative defence of, I think, Carter Combs and not really anyone else. As for Jack and Caleb Newton, their affirmative defence was, well, whatever happened to Noah, that's kind of his choice. As for drinking and having the responsibilities there to drink or not being forced, and then whatever he chose to do after that. And by drinking and getting drunk, that's what inevitably made him more vulnerable, and his own actions made him more vulnerable and more susceptible to accidents and dangerous actions kind of falling on him at the end of the day, like the side-by-side rollover and anything else after that point. It was kind of like Jack and Caleb washing their hands clean of having anything to do with Noah. So it could be considered quite cold when a best friend could consider that or it be used in court. Take in mind, it was an affirmative defence. So I guess suggested by the legal team. But as an affirmative defence, if it was to be used there to try and diminish, to remove responsibility, to redirect the focus and blame on the victim, Noah Presgrove, to protect oneself, at the cost of protecting oneself, is kind of going cold on your best friend by even considering using that, legal strategy, defence strategy. It may have not been thought of by Jack, maybe it was considered by the legal team, but if it was to ever be used in court and Jack said, yes, I will do that, it's kind of like stabbing Noah Presgrove in the back to save yourself in a cold way, in a dismissive way. Granted, maybe Jack shouldn't have to follow Noah around 24/7 at the party. Jack a similar age to Noah, both underage drinking, but still drinking nevertheless. Both friends to one another. Are we suggesting that they should have been looking out for one another? Jack should have been safeguarding Noah more. But, for most of the time at the party, Noah wasn't a victim. I guess, providing it's true that when Noah walked away at 3:30, that's when Noah became a victim to whatever. But before that, Noah wasn't a victim and was like anyone else at the party, from what we know of up to now. So I think we need to make that clear. Noah wasn't a victim 24/7. With some of the never-seen-before party photos which have been revealed with time and analysed, and the more recent one of Jack Newton being written on either by Noah or someone previous to that, and Jack's shorts being half pulled down, similar to how Noah went for it on Saturday, shows that they all had a bit of an equal part in playing around, being on the receiving end of different stuff and possible pranks and jokes. So Noah wasn't the odd one out or singled out in that sense as a victim to being bullied or a victim to being peer pressured like that. Others had their fair share. Even when Noah may have got slapped, Jack Newton was like offering to be the tribute. Slap me, punch me, hit me, come on. That's what Jack was asking for, and he didn't get what he wanted, but that's what he did in the moment. So, got to take that in mind, in consideration. But as for this whole beating situation, that was considered as like an affirmative defence by Carter Combs' team also in the response, and the papers, documents suggesting that Noah was the aggressor, that Noah engaged in mutual combat, and whatever happened past that point kind of falls back on Noah for starting it or expanding, escalating on the moment or in the moment. But the wrongful death lawsuit, at least from what I can remember when looking at it as for the different responsibilities, when it came to when it came to Val Patrol, them supplying a partygoer knows best friend alcohol without asking for identification, allowing it, then allowing that alcohol to then go down to the party and partially play a role, possibly in Noah consuming it, and partially a role as in leading up to Noah's death or his vulnerability phase of being too drunk. Val Patrol allowing all that indirectly and just simply just not asking for identification, which is very reckless, of course. Jack Newton, as in responsibilities to, for example, the alcohol, bringing it down, distributing it. I guess in line with that, or it might have been more collective, promising Noah copious amounts of alcohol originally. Whether that was discussed on the call first time round when Noah came Saturday, or the second time when Jack wanted Noah back and used persuasive language. Like, well, we've got more alcohol, you can have more, whatever, could be considered. Caleb Newton, responsibility as it was suggested in the wrongful death lawsuit was in regard to him giving permission for Noah to ride that vehicle, and the vehicle belonged to Caleb. Yet Caleb, there was no hard evidence of Caleb ever being at the party. Even Caden said there was no evidence when he was there. He was 100% sure that Caleb was never at the party, as in Jack's father. And beside that, as for who owned the side-by-side, it was supposedly Jack Newton, not Caleb. So if Caleb's not there and Caleb's not the owner, then why would Noah have to phone up, call Caleb for permission, and then Caleb say, sure, you can use it? Why would Noah even consider asking for permission when he didn't ask permission from the Newton family? Can I drink alcohol? He didn't ask his own family, Noah's Presgrove's family, as in, Robin Smith, Ashley Chadwick, Deborah Smith, Casey Smith, Madison Rawlings, can I please have this alcohol? Do I have permission? There's no word or mention of that. Did Noah ever make a call to Caleb or Stevie Howard? Oh, sir, miss, could I please have this alcohol? Do I have your permission? No, no sign of that. So why would it be so specific and selective with Noah, out of all things, asking permission to use a side-by-side when the actual person, a non-owner, isn't even there? It doesn't make any sense. If you're going to ask permission past the point of already being drunk, are you even going to consider being considerate and consider asking and reaching out to others how they think and if they would allow it or not? When you're drunk, you're not going to be thinking as clear or as straight as you would be when sober. So you might be more reckless, you might be more neglectful, you might be more impulsive, you might react and act and feel different. So you're less likely to be considerate in that sense. If Noah at any point was to ask permission, it would be before getting drunk, and it would probably be, could I have alcohol? Do I have your permission? And not from the friends, but from his parents or friends of parents, and so on. But if that didn't happen, then how likely is it that it did with Caleb? No. So hopefully that example kind of puts it into perspective there. As for Stevie Howard, Johnny Trout, Will Coxon, the land the party took place on, there's a bit of responsibility there. Stevie Howard, the reference of, well, because she knew of the party supposedly, but she didn't do anything to stop it. She just allowed it and knew what was going on or what could go on, so it falls back on there. Someone had an idea of what was going to go down. Alcohol was going to be present. She should have shut it down, taken action quick, so it would have saved Noah's life. But in fairness, out of all the other parties which Caden's attended and Noah Presgrove was there too, how many of those parties involved it being shut down, intervention taking place, the land party, property house owner stepping on in and saying, right, I've heard about this party, I know what was going on, I'm going to call it a day now, party's over, we don't want you getting drunk anymore, we don't want anyone dying. Would any of that have been considered in the first place? Nope. Did anyone die back then? Nope. But this time around, 2023, September 4th, there was a death. Not that it's completely inevitable, but, continuing to party, and if it's a bit reckless and it's been repeated with time, not everyone's always going to get lucky. So yeah, some people may have known about the party. They could have stepped in to stop or prevent it, but they weren't to know what was going to happen to Noah after, as in the death. If they knew about the death, or they knew that was going to happen, like it was all pre-planned, then you could say they're responsible, they're guilty for allowing it. But if they genuinely were left in the dark and just assumed it would be like any other party Noah has attended, why would it be so different this time round? You just wouldn't expect or anticipate. And sometimes when you don't react or expect much, it's because it's the most natural response to show. So you get the idea. Some. As for Carter, Avery, Logan, that follows under the lines of party host, even if they say in their responses that they're not party host. And BBC in recent time, I believe, had said that Avery wasn't the party host, didn't send the invites out. So ultimately, who did? Because it's being hosted at like a private place in a way, on land, at a house which people live at and the birthday girl lives at, and her birthday's being held there. Someone must have organised it in some way, got the alcohol in, maybe if there was any balloons or banners like that pink ribbon what she was wearing, Avery. Maybe the cowgirl hat as well. Just to celebrate, be light-hearted. Surely there was some planning and preparation involved, and some kind of invite system to put it out in town, put the word out that there is a party here and you're welcome. Because if no one hosted the party and no one sent invites out, then how would anyone know a party's taking place? Surely, if nothing was done, no one would show up. But clearly they did. Supposedly accumulative over the days, 30 to 40 people. To reach out to that many people, for them to be present at some point at the party, clearly there was communication going on somewhere. So there was some form of hosting. So that's the only grey area, a bit of red flag to me, as in the people that lived there, possible party host, are denying it completely. And when it comes to the wrongful death lawsuit, as I said at the start, the reason why it's overhyped is because people are thinking the wrongful death lawsuit literally links onto the whole beating situation, murder, death, absolute foul play. But more so, the wrongful death lawsuit is just like the beginning of the possibilities as to what it could expand on to, with the possibilities of murder, the possibilities of foul play. But to get to that, you've got to do the wrongful death lawsuit first, which is more focused and orientated on responsibilities, safeguarding, and in the presence of alcohol should have done better, as in not distributing or making sure Noah was either drinking responsibly or wasn't drinking whatsoever because of his age. But there were still other people of the same age, if not younger, that were drinking. Whilst they did not end up dead, they're not mentioned in the wrongful death lawsuit the same way Noah is. Noah is considered the only victim because Noah was the only one that ended up dead. But, you know, depending on how the alcohol was distributed, you could say other people were victims to peer pressure of drinking or being persuaded. If there's any manipulation, if you want to push it that far, but it hasn't been. It's only focused and orientated on Noah, the people who he's around, involving Jack Newton with the alcohol, the buying of it and distributing at the party, and then the birthday girl and party host, as it's labelled. It's more so about the social hosting, rules, laws broken, alcohol safeguarding. It's like holding people accountable at the early stages of the case, holding people accountable at the early stages of the timeline before it did lead up to Noah's death, and then bridging on from the responses of some of the defendants as a cliffhanger, as in, well, whatever happened to Noah past a certain point, that's on him. Pinning the blame onto the victim. Victim blaming is what some of the defendants, based on their affirmative defense, has suggested. And the affirmative defense is more a strategy that could be used in the future, not that's being used right now. It's worth taking that in mind. Some people may have misunderstood it early on, such as from the Army page. I gave my raw reaction at the time when I saw it for the very first time, so you'll be able to look back and see the change and the evolution when it comes to understanding it. But the reason why it's overhyped is because people think it's the be-all and end-all, but it's not. It's just the beginning. And the reason why it could be considered undervalued is because if you just see it as social hosting, that's all, that's people are going to be punished for. No, it's like if any of that was true and there was true justice and people were held accountable and there were consequences, and then through that process of questioning or the discovery phase or anyone grassing up on one another or breaking down at some point in between or beyond in court and actually telling more of the actual truth, which expands on to what happened to Noah the moment he walked away. Did he end up dead, murdered, foul play? Was he moved on? So it could escalate, and I would understand that because that's exactly what happened in the Dylan Rounds case when Brenner was arrested on other warrants dating back to 2021. Aggravated assault, I think with a lawn or a deck chair on a local. And then some felony gun charges, being in the possession of a firearm or two whilst being a felon, not allowed, getting in trouble for that. Weapons confiscated, taken in, held at, I think, Weber County Jail. And whilst being held and locked up somewhere, it expanded on building the case for Dylan Rounds and the involvement with Brenner and tying it all together and trying to get him to talk and open up down the line, eventually make him break or a plea deal being made. And that plea deal made him reveal the location of Dylan and basically accepted that, yeah, Brenner was responsible for it all. And eventually there was a breakthrough. So by locking someone up or holding them at a place, it could lead to them confessing, breaking down eventually, and spilling the truth more about themselves, involvement, or others within the wrongful death lawsuit. I still think it's undervalued, as in, whilst all the focus is on the defendants' names like Jack, Caleb, Logan, Carter, Avery, what about the John Jane Doe, male, female? Who could they possibly be, and why are they still John Jane Doe unidentified? When will they be identified? What will happen about that? When there's more anonymity, an anonymous presence, it adds a bit more weight, mystery, and intrigue. For some that can't be identified or named, is it because they know much more? There's more weight on the table, there's more cost there compared to the other defendants that have, been mentioned and responded and served. Has John Jane Doe been served and responded, or is that still ongoing? What's really happening there? Not really seen too much. Will they ever come to light? Is it someone within the case? Is it a party goer? Is it a friend, a parent of a party goer? Is it someone that we're familiar with? Would Jasmine Millan be dragged into it? Maybe not. I'm just thinking of possible names. Would Colton Newton be dragged into it? I know some people have said mistakes were made in the wrongful death lawsuit. It came across as amateur, but desperate attempts were made to try and pin some responsibility on Caleb Newton, the father, even if he wasn't even there. So it's desperation from the family, so it's not a good look on Noah, and it shows that they're grasping at straws, and it might not lead to ultimate justice for Noah. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just relaying what has been talked about in general by people in the community and so on. So that's just a little bit of a summary from what Mike was talking about and my thoughts on the wrongful death lawsuit. Let's see what Pam had to say in response. I guess in response, if it's a part of the same thread, Pam had said, not sure what part your bahaha is geared towards. Are we turning into a sheep? Mike's response, that makes zero sense. Rob and Cindy from Partners in True Crime showed up something that her son's timeline was correct. Well, she would already know that and be more than happy to show proof. Point is, police had done forensics. Why anyone even considered what the pressies had to say was because family and a podcast supported them other than his best friend. Look at how that turned out. It seems to be a little bit wishy-washy here, as in context. It's a bit vague. Partners in True Crime, Rob and Cindy, giving Caden a platform and a voice to speak on, gave the same opportunities for Jack Newton to do the same thing. As for Partners in True Crime, the last video that they did on Noah was that pre-recorded interview with Jack Newton and Ashley Chadwick, Robin Smith reacting to it with Rob and Cindy. So, kind of interesting. As for the whole timeline of Caden and the phone data and the proof of that, well, Caden had said public, the police never took his phone and never analysed it. And Alicia has stated Caden's phone was taken, analysed by police and confirmed that 515 was correct. Why are two people saying two different things. If they can't even say or think in line with one another, how are you supposed to believe in the truth when there's no consistency? And how would Noah's family react to that as well, on top of other, inconsistencies and discrepancies? It gets a little bit confusing. As for police doing forensics, yeah, but did they do anything like that, or digital forensics on Caden's phone to check for the timeline there? Because ultimately, Caden's timeline, whether it's correct or not, is ultimately important, because if true, it sets the tone and makes everything else after that and the delays suspicious, and the people that were supposedly there earlier more suspicious. And if it turns out that it was wrong, it's crucial because it shows a lot of wasted time, wasted breath, a lot of headaches and confusion, and maybe other people wrongfully called out and accused. So it can have consequences both ways. Pam, response, Jack is the victim. Last time I checked, he's living, breathing, and expecting a baby. Jack is not dead. Noah is the deceased victim in all of this. How dare you claim anyone is a victim other than Noah? That's pretty damn low even for you. Right, so we've got to be very careful here, because what Mike had said could be considered shocking and bold. Where it's highlighted in green, Jack is a victim. But it's important to acknowledge that without context, it can come across as bad. But with context, you can interpret it in a more understanding, empathetic way, and not just one-sided to Jack, but towards other people caught up in this whole case and the tragic death of Noah. There is more to it, but because it's vague and Pam has taken it face value as it is, taking it bad as like an insult on Noah. How dare someone else be a victim? It's seen as either discrediting or diminishing what Noah had gone through. Other people get to live their lives, but that's the thing. It's not always quite like that, and I'm going to touch on that topic a bit later on. I'll probably give a double disclaimer, just as a heads up. A bit later on, I'll do a bit of analysis. It could be a little bit triggering, so you're welcome to carry on watching up to when I give you the next disclaimer, and then you can pause the video, click off, do whatever that you're comfortable with. But we need to touch upon it because others could consider what Pam says here, based on other interpretations, as extremely ignorant and too tunnel vision. Okay? What else do we have here? Mike to Pam. Family holds the key to stopping it. Nobody has been cleared, not even the Texas boys, like Robin said. Well, yeah, I do remember Robin Smith made that comment on Facebook saying 5 Texas boys have been cleared. Mike here is saying nobody has been cleared. So, do we have proof that they've not been cleared? As for Robin saying that they have, it's just based on her words only, but you'd hope to think that Robin has been in contact with police and the police told her the truth. But beside that, it said simply because it's an unsolved case. That's why Robin said it. Well, Robin said that she was told by police that situation. No one has been named a suspect to Claire. In fact, it's not a murder investigation. I've been around plenty and seen you flop back and forth depending on if you're in spy mode. I think you're a slivery snake. Oh, hold on a minute. We got the animal names coming on in. That might trigger someone in the background watching if they're not done with my channel just yet. A slivery snake that needs a hobby. You're bi? What, bisexual? Or you mean you be? You'd be better than Michael and Justin and Alicia and Jen. Quit acting like you haven't all put those kids through the mud. You also assume they're in the groups they are not. I just saw some pictures of Jack and Carter very happy. Well deserved. I personally can't imagine losing my best friend, then being sued by his family. You accused me of being someone saying I let it slip. That tells me all I need to know about your skills. Now, Mike, in addition, they also didn't come forward about Caden either. I don't think they gave a about what a bunch of bored housewives think. And then Pam's response with her bullet points. Number 1, I don't agree the family holds the key to stopping anything. I firmly believe if they had concrete answers, the wrongful death lawsuit never would have happened. LE holds the key to all of this. It doesn't have to be a murder investigation for LE to figure out what happened. Even if it was simply an accident on the road, then there is someone responsible. Therefore, anyone on the road or on the area at the time Noah died is a viable suspect. So let's just use Jack. And then it goes on, but we didn't see the rest because only so much was showed. And then a little bit more here, whatever that's about. Regardless, I feel Kate and Press's timeline didn't add up and their lies got them in over their heads. That's just my opinion based on the information I have to work with. Mike, same song and dance with you, Pam. No, Jack's not dead, even though his life has been threatened. Noah chose to spend all his time with the Newtons for a reason. What reason was that? Yes, Jack is a victim. Get over yourself. Noah's family suing Jack is a slap in the face to Noah, all under the guise of wanting answers. Sure. So we're interpreting this as it's not what Noah would want for Jack to go through. And then there's a photo there of whoever. Mike to Pam, don't you have some phone calls to record? I sure hope your husband is smart enough to not get involved. I don't think it would end well. Jan saying you have connections, not good for his employment. So some are suggesting that this could be a threat of you get involved, you drag someone else in, he could get sacked and fired. This type of crossover with people possibly losing their jobs and lives getting possibly damaged or torn apart in different ways, pettiness coming on in. I've seen this all before in the Dylan Rounds case. It's not worth it. There's no real winners at the end. But what is that photo? I mean, has that been edited? Because it looks like there is a giant hairy mole on the person's chin. That can't be real, can it? It doesn't look like it. And who's that supposed to be anyway? I don't know, but that hairy mole, I guess it's been edited in a way. Yeah. But as for that little screenshot, you have to ask Boss Jan Fiorillo, what's this all about? September 20th, 2024 at 1:02 p.m. Jan says, yes, Pam has been one of my moles. Moles. Did someone do an edit, putting a hairy mole on the person's chin, say, yes, you are a mole? I don't know. Maybe that's me looking too deep into it. Anyway, let's just focus in her. So Pam is one of my moles, has been taken a lot of grief. She is in deep. She told me she messaged you because she keeps getting kicked out of groups, basically rendering her somewhat ineffective. She has a few connections in Oklahoma and technology. She is also under a non-disclosure agreement, so I am a little surprised that she messaged you without talking to me first. Oh, superseding high command. But we've been discussing bringing you into the loop. I told her that I trust you. Oh, no. This is giving me flashbacks to the Dylan Rounds case. Oh, no. Okay, I'll let her back into the group. You cannot defend her in any way, Michael. Oh. Or link she and I. Oh. Well, this kind of came out, didn't it, in the end? So that didn't go down too well. So this is supposedly Michael Faye's Kaz on in the blue box saying, I will back her in the groups. And Jan says, no, you cannot defend her in any way, Michael, or link she and I together. She knows how to work two sides of a discussion without blowing her cover. I think what we should do now is take a look at the comments, reactions by people and their points of views before I respond back with my deep analysis point. So Michael, Michelle, however you want to say the name, Jack Newton is nowhere near a victim. He's a perpetrator from day one. So first sentence ends with a bullet point. First starting off with an opinion, then following on based on the language and wording as a fact. This what Lee says, that Jack is a perpetrator from day one, said with a level of high confidence and could be interpreted as it's a statement, a fact, guaranteed. But do we actually have hard evidence? As people of the general public, do you have hard evidence at this moment in time to say with 100% certainty and absolute confidence that Jack Newton is a perpetrator directly involved for Noah's death or the after effects of it. You know? I've not seen any direct hard evidence at this moment. Do we have photos of Jack on the scene at a dodgy time? No. Do we have video footage? Public? Nope. Any leaked audio from around the scene or area at an unusual time? Nope. So where is that hard evidence to say that he's a perpetrator? If you say it as a theory, an opinion, an idea, fair enough. But when you use this type of language and wording, it can come across as incorrect and damaging, whether that be damaging to Jack, if it turns out he is innocent or somewhat innocent. It can be damaging upon the person that said the line in the first place. This is an example of a reckless comment by a reckless individual, and we have seen it elsewhere on the army page in the earlier days where some were saying Jack is the killer, Jack murdered his best friend. They're wording it as like it's already happened and it's a statement, but can't be backed up with hard evidence, or it wasn't back then. What else do we have? Are you sure he's not Mike, one of the boys from the Texas boys that was there from Texas with the guns? The ones that looked scared? Where did they come from again? Were they even old enough? What? Right, so Mike Johnson previously has been called by Justin as a impersonating Brooke Bounds Carter with a fake wig and lipstick and a dress. And now Mike Johnson is being labelled as one of the Texas boys from the party. The bit what stands out to me, Texas guys with the guns. Lila? What? We've not seen any videos or photos of any Texas guys holding guns at the party. Only Isaac Rojas, and he was in the background. And I don't think he's one of the Texas boys. So the ones that look scared, what? Don't remember seeing people looking scared at the party in the footage. People looked happy. Is this a bit of a peculiar comment made or so? Julie Ann. A little too much involvement and finger pointing is not a good look. I often wonder about people like that. Gets to be an obsession with him. How is any of this about justice for Noah? Well, don't worry, Julie. I'll bring it back round as to the overall holistic outlook as to why, at the end of the day. Pam says, my thoughts as well. And in the process of doing these things, they're actually making the defendants look worse. If they believe these kids are innocent, then they are spending so much time sabotaging them. They'll be researching better tactics instead of attacking the real victim supporters. See, no attacking needs to be done. Simple disagreements can come about, but I don't think some humans have understood how to do that. Sounds to me like he knows something or someone is trying very hard to keep it covered. Is he kin to those that were present? A different Jan? What kind of non-disclosure disagreements are people signing, and for what and whom? What kind of behind-the-scenes BS is going on? Is it supposed to be a group of people that care that happens? Right. Okay, the fighting, the name-calling, same old usual. View more comments. Well, of course, I don't know why it's not showing them all. Sheila, he's rude, belligerent, a bully. Justice for Noah. Dawn. Pam. What did Alicia and Caden do? I'd been on this from the beginning, but I stepped away because it became a new people and some of it was being said or other things that were just out of the way. I defended Alicia and Caden, that's why I'm wondering, what am I missing? Well, as for Alicia and Caden, there was a lot of discrepancies which simply caused confusion. Documented on my channel, of course. Jen, the only person we know for certain suffered irreversible harm in this case is Noah, and someone being criticised online is not the same category of harm as a young man losing his life. Yes, that's correct, Jan, but there are different levels and there are different outcomes and there's different areas as to how a person could be a victim of something or witnessing on the receiving end. But we'll get to that. Noah. Right. If he truly lives in Tulsa, maybe he can take all his crime-solving talents and find Nancy Guthrie. Right. Not really heard of that case before. I just read your screenshot, Pam. If you don't have a case to file charges against this freak, I don't know who would. This guy seems deranged and it sounds like he could be dangerous. That's aimed towards Mike, that. My husband and I are both looking into our options to address the threats. I mean, the threats interpreted what Mike indirectly is suggesting could be if Pam's husband gets involved, he could risk losing his job and a call could be made in so he loses it. That's how it comes across. And we've seen how that can go within the Dylan Rounds community. Lives can be ruined, things can be turned upside down. Right, goes, what says, I've read comments on that site. For the most part, they try to convince people that all of the party goers are victims. It's not about trying to convince Annette. It's simply about making overt non-participant observations. But if you're emotionally dialed in to Noah, set in your ways, and you're not going to understand the other perspectives. That is why this whole emotional thinking and emotional attachment can blind one's judgment and critical thinking. We've got a different Donna. We're going to say these alternative names. He certainly is stuck on the bored housewife agenda. Derogatory language. Right. Keyboard warrior. Bozo needs to try very hard to look like an idiot. Jan, thank you for saying this. One thing that stands out to me is the discussions, strange contradiction where same people claiming others are accusing someone of murder are often the ones repeatedly introducing the word murder themselves. Well, what would you do about that? You just talk about people accusing someone of and then censor the word so you don't say it yourself. I mean, it just seems as unusual as you're simply referring to history, timelines as a form of learning, and you re-quote someone from the past, what they did, what they said, and then you get told off at reintroducing that same word or action or named individual, bringing them back into relevance, making it a problem once again. But in order to solve something, you've got to talk about the problem in the first place, which means talking about the past so you can move forwards. So what, you don't say the word, you don't say anything, but then nothing changes? Yeah, I don't think people thought that through. Most of us being very clear, no one should label someone a murderer. But Jan, there are people, not familiar faces though, but I witnessed it myself when I was on the army page. There was some random individuals here and there that outright said Jack is a murderer. And at the end of the day, it is no hard evidence backed up with it. It's so reckless and silly to do. If people say, in my opinion, a theory, a perspective could be, that's better worded. Not as damaging on the other person that could or may not be innocent or could be innocent, you know. It just seems to get forgotten about, that part, which is a problem. But then again, Jan says most of us have been very clear, so she's not saying everyone. That's something at least. What's also telling us these screenshots is how quickly disagreement turns into personal attacks and intimidation. Can be interpreted that way. I best view more so we see all of her comments. Well, it didn't go on that long. That's fine. Noah is the victim. Right. Well, this is a little bit of a contradiction in a way, what Jan has done, kind of caught herself here. So when Jan says about, to me in these discussions, it's strange contradiction where the same people claiming others are accusing someone of murder are often the ones repeatedly introducing the word murder themselves. Well, I could say it's kind of strange, bit of a contradiction where the people that are constantly talking about victims and who's a victim and who isn't, and there's only one victim, are the same people referring to the word victim afterwards and going on about victim. You know? Interesting. And it goes on and on and on and on. Power, mind. Okay, I think it's now time I step in. To catch up with first what was mentioned earlier with the exchange with Mike and Pam's other comments, that the family, Noah's family, has the power, the key to, stop it. Stop what? The misinformation, the confusion, the lies, Caden's timeline. What power does Noah's family have when they're the ones wanting the subpoena, which has been granted since, because they lack access to the investigative material and evidence within the case? So whatever the family had previous wasn't enough, and they needed more to be able to expand on it, whether it complements the wrongful death lawsuit, or if they check for additional details to see if they could make a case or add other stuff in. Of course, you'd think that, well, if the police had it first and they've gone through it all and are satisfied with the situation of closed the investigation, then that must be more than enough. What makes you think the family, who lack the experience what the police have, be able to pick up and see things they don't? But you never know. There can always be exceptions, because people may have an eye for detail or pick up on an important point, or if you wanted to put the argument across that there was some kind of corruption, or there was some kind of mismanagement, or some kind of or lack of proactiveness, it might have led to not picking up or not pouncing on a certain aspect and identifying the importance behind that, neglecting it in a way, like possible other evidence at the scene or at the party house which may have been neglected at some point. Pam's response that, well, with the wrongful death lawsuit, that probably wouldn't have happened if the family had answers, I guess. But sometimes you can have answers, but what action does it lead to? I mean, people have been debating and discussing that if things truly came through, there was a breakthrough at some point, if there was any incriminating evidence, if there was any footage or a beatdown, a murder, wouldn't action have already been taken by now? Maybe because there hasn't, and it's been quiet, and how it's gone, maybe it never happened in the first place, and it was made up at certain points. Other areas where there could be forms of answers. Not all answers are always true. It could be a false answer, and that's why it doesn't lead to any action. And it could, in a case with the Presgrove situation, the family could have been fed false answers at the start, didn't go anywhere, but it still led to the wrongful death lawsuit. It depends what type of answers, the true answers or the false answers, right? And Pam's mentioned about the LE are the ones that have the key to all of this. As for the investigative material and evidence, I guess so, yeah. But if there's anyone, drifting away, stranger, unfamiliar face, involved in Noah's death but got away with it, and like what Jasmine Millan said, November 2023, that there is actually someone really out there thinking they got away with murder or something like that. I've done a video in recent time, be sure to check it out. It should be available up there where the I symbol is in the playlist. Jasmine Millan, a friend to Noah, a party girl that attended the party which Noah did, and the one that did that selfie outside saying Noah's missing, to say that they think Noah was murdered and admitted it. I mean, that's big. It stands out. Not enough people have talked about that. Those that push for murder, push as in what they believe and what they think, but they won't give credit to Jasmine Millan. People say, oh, we've heard about that. Yeah, it's old news. Been there, done that, as like Laura would say. Well, quote the individual, because what you think is an opinion at the end of the day. What another person thinks is an opinion, but arguably a little bit more of a valid one, because it's someone that knows Noah personally and someone that was on site at the property in the build-up to Noah's death and present post-disappearance of Noah when walking away. I think Jasmine Millan admitting at one point that Noah was murdered and the real killer who's done a criminal act is getting away with it on the run, whilst the general public blamed the partygoers and friends. I think Jasmine Millan admitting murder is more important than a random stranger online member of the general public who wasn't even at the party, who may not even know Noah, saying, oh yeah, it's murder. Both are opinions, but one has more weight than the other. One's a bit more significant because of location, place, person of interest, within reason. Hopefully people understand that. So with the level, the weight, the importance behind it, when people refer to murder, and that being the possible case, what it could be likely, give credit to Jasmine Millan. People want to praise Caden Pressey, for speaking out first and being brave, going against the darkness. Well, what about Jasmine Millan? She did it in 2023, publicly admitting that Noah was murdered. So Jasmine acknowledges Noah was murdered in 2023. Doesn't get a round of applause. Caden Pressey in 2024 onwards goes on about, it's hard to believe that the friends could do anything about it, but then later, I feel that they are responsible in some way, and everyone's like, wait, standing applause. Why the difference? Why wasn't Jasmine Millan at one point treated the same way as Caden Pressey? If Jasmine was so strong to speak out against the claims what others were saying, as in, oh, it's a hit and run, as like what Jack was suggesting, as what Stevie Howard was pushing, hit and run at the start. Jasmine said murder. Why didn't Jasmine get shut down, silenced, or threatened if she was going against what the others were saying as to the cause of death? Because if you're directly involved in it, then you probably wouldn't admit or acknowledge that type of cause of death, especially when it's close to home or close to proximity of you if there's involvement, or you're close to those that are involved. You'd probably just side with it's a different cause of death and not murder. So for Jasmine to single herself out in such early days and acknowledge that and not get credited, and yet the general public say, well, we've heard that before. Yeah, you may have seen it, you may have heard it, but did you talk about it enough? No. Did you credit? No. Do you at least credit till this day? No. You've seen it, you've acknowledged it, but you think, I'll just stick to what I think, not what Jasmine thinks. Jasmine's points are irrelevant, not worth talking about, not worth acknowledging, not worth even including in the same conversation as ours. What? She's a party goer. She was there. She knows Noah Presgrove up to a certain point. If she says murder, then that could be more telling than a random stranger online. So there seems to be a possible agenda. That's what happens at times. Psychologically speaking, if you're already set in your ways and you already made your mind up about not liking someone, if for some reason down the line, if they align themselves with the same thoughts and opinions as you, you're in the same boat, but you hate that and you will choose not to associate yourself with them with the same beliefs or values. And if they tried themselves, you would retch, metaphorically. That's what's happening here. Yeah. Now, if there was a backstory, as in you were opposing forces, you believed in different things at one point, there was fighting back and forth and toxicity, when you finally do come on to the same terms or sides, naturally, you might not want to associate with them. And that's fine, because the war has already been fought, damage has already been done. But if there was no prior negative history or toxicity, and it's just because you don't like that person or you don't trust that person, just based on a previous snap, that seems a little bit petty. It seems a little bit one-sided and a bit one-dimensional tunnel vision. And that's emotionally biased and emotionally driven. Not good, is it? I think that latter part is how it supposedly is with a handful of people out there. Anyway, the other thing, when Pam mentioned about accident on road, someone's going to be responsible. There's a fair chance that that's probably the case. Considered a suspect as well. Well, yeah, not really much else to go on from that. The only thing you could suggest as an accident, but it would have to likely involve a vehicle left at the scene or crashed. Not that it happened, but let's just say if Noah wanted to go back home and no one would give him a ride, if he was that desperate or if he needed to go, and if his vehicle was on site, because he was capable or willing to get into the side-by-side and then the rollover occurred, if Noah had his own vehicle parked up at the house, would he have tried using that to get back home? Because if he did, based on what happened with the side-by-side rollover, the same could have occurred with his own vehicle. And if it happened when he got down to the highway, it could have been fatal itself for himself. And no one would have been a suspect, or some people could have been considered a suspect at first, depending, but onwards, it would just be on Noah. It didn't happen that, but it could have. And I've mentioned it quite a bit in the past, but it doesn't seem to get acknowledged by some enough. And that if Noah had been driving, and it could have been fatal for him, any other people on the highway could have been collateral damage. You think of drunk driving and the damage and impacts that can have on innocent people on the road, beside the victim themselves, others become victims because of one's recklessness. Whilst it didn't happen, it could have. Now, with that put aside, what we need to focus in on now is the aspects of victim and survivor. So just as a disclaimer, this won't be as deep as previous videos, but it's just to set the tone and how it applies to different people, and more specifically with the Noah Presgrove case. So if it gets a bit too intense or too much, you can pause the video. You can even mute the video, take time out, you do whatever you need to do, what's right for you. Okay, so I'll start right now. When it comes to a victim, it can apply to a person on the receiving end of a negative experience encounter, which can be considered somewhat impactful. A certain act, action, performed, committed by another individual or group, and you're on the receiving end of, it impacts you physically and or mentally. A certain action such as bullying, cyberbullying, it's a bad act, and I guess in ways it can be considered illegal depending on the situations. Illegal or not, it's a bad thing to do, and if you're on the receiving end of it, you are a victim to bullying. If a person is burgled, robbed, their car is stolen, they are a victim of theft. They're a victim of their house being burgled. It's when a criminal act or an immoral action is performed where damage can be inflicted upon an innocent person who's done nothing wrong. They're on the receiving end of it. They're hurt and harmed in some way. They are a victim to a crime. They are a victim to the loss of something. They're the victim to inflicted pain on them, and so on. People can also say metaphorically that an individual can be a victim of their own downfall because of how their mind works and how things can spiral. So it can come about in many different ways. A person can be a victim in many different ways. You could be, when we refer to the victim's family, the victim's friends, we're not saying that the family are victims or the friends of Noah are victims, but the term victim would be Noah. When you say victim's family members, it means the family members of that victim. Victim's friends, the friends of that victim that's no longer here. So, got to make that clear. But still, the family can be a victim of how the case is being handled under certain circumstances, or a victim of grief, where being a victim can mean being associated with an event, associated with a wave, an impact which has affected you deeply on, or to some extent, right? Being involved, caught up in something. So being a victim doesn't always have to apply to a crime on the receiving end of. Doesn't always have to be being a victim to death itself, but being a victim to grief itself, how that aspect can impact you and how you're dealing with it, the cost of someone else that is the victim of death, if that makes sense. Of course, things can get more deeper and complex when it comes to the loss of something or someone, and how you can be a victim to that or be made to feel like a victim. It can get very deep at times. Behind closed doors, a person could be a victim to poor treatment, physically, mentally, and yet the other individual that's actually causing all the problems and harm flips the tables and the switch and acts as if they're the victim, and that the true victim is the crazy one and the problem to it all. So, from a gaslighting, changing the tables and really confusing that person who's simply innocent. A victim of gaslighting, a victim of control, a victim of physical or psychological poor treatment. See, there's many different ways you can be a victim. As for Noah Presgrove's case, I mean, Noah is a victim of maybe a possible crime. Noah is a victim of maybe manslaughter. Noah is a victim of an accident or something gone too far. Right? I'm trying to use that vaguely because we don't know the true or official cause of death at this moment. But Noah is a victim. Something bad happened to him. Now, not that it's the case, but if a person had passed away and it was only them present and they did something reckless or silly and it cost their life, are they still a victim? Yes. A victim to their own misfortune, a victim of their own downfall. When it's self-done or accidentally done to oneself, you can still be a victim of your own mistakes, a victim responsible on the receiving end, vice versa, of situations. So the term can be used interchangeably in different circumstances. It's not linear. And I think people who are emotionally charged in the Noah Presgrove case have treated the term victim for it to only apply to one person and one person only. Look, you could say it in a bit more of a reformed or refined way. When it comes to the case being put in place and the turning point, which is Noah's death, in that moment, from what we know of, Noah is the only victim. But the moment the investigation opened up, the moment the general public got involved with their thoughts online and then things started going wrong downhill, name calling, false claims made, slanderous comments, threats, possible doxing, and so on and so on. And then other partygoers and friends at one point maybe engaging online or interviews separately, and then people online commenting on it, critiquing it, not giving opinions but using words recklessly as facts, like Jack's a murderer, Jack knows what's up, this and that, and we've seen it already before. That's reckless and can be damaging, especially when it's not backed up with hard evidence and it's not even portrayed as a theory, at least. Yeah, that's where victims can come involved. That could be people in the case, it could be outside of the case, a victim of harassment, a victim of bullying online, a victim of intimidation on the receiving end of a bad action which was done to cause harm with a form of intent to cause it. Now, other times you can be a victim and something unexpected has happened. It could be like an environmental effect. It could be a health-related effect in which a person about has fallen ill or passed and you're on the receiving end, as in picking up all the pieces and trying to figure out what to do next. That can be hard on an individual. Does it directly make them a victim? No, but does it still, justify that they're going to struggle and suffer and try and deal with the situation? Absolutely, that can't be taken away. A person's suffering at the hands of something that's happened out of their control and it's unexpected. Victim or not, a person can still suffer in a situation. I think people get so caught up on the word victim because they only think that Noah is the only one because he's had it worse off because he died. Other people didn't. Other people get to live on with their lives. And that's where one of the most dangerous, ignorant points comes into play. And I'm only talking in general here because it can apply in general and it might apply more stronger in other situations in life, okay? But it does have appliance to the Noah Presgrove case. That just because someone has passed away, that's not good or fair for them. Everyone around that was close or connected to that said person, a victim of whatever, is impacted as well. They feel the tremors and waves passing on through, that feeling of loss, that void within, especially those that knew of that individual and may have been even emotionally close as friends, family members, significant others. If there was a relationship, that feeling of loss, that feeling of loss of control, and that unpredictability, that uncertainty of it just happening and it being pulled away. You're not anticipating it, you weren't expecting it. It's that unknown. That unpredictability adds shock value on top of grief, on top of denial, on top of processing it all, on top of sadness and frustration. Why did that have to happen? Why was that me? Why was it them? Why couldn't it be someone else? And all of that can go through the mind. Whilst people that are suffering in that moment may not be victims in that sense. They are victims of dealing with grief, being on the receiving end of that aspect, and how a person can feel and be made to feel when going through that. And even indirectly, a person could become a victim whilst dealing with grief. If others out there try diminishing it or playing it down or insulting them, could come across as insensitive and belittling and diminishing and manipulation, victim to manipulation, victim to emotional blackmail, victim to a form of control, as in what you can and can't do, what you can think and what you can't think. You can't be open, you can be, you can't, in different situations, closed doors or even open forums online. So, let's just apply it to Jack Newton for a second. Because Jack was best friends with Noah, beside Noah's family, of course, it's going to hit Jack pretty hard, or you would expect it to at least, because if you're the best friend to someone and vice versa, you'd be close to them and have had memories. You've formed probably predictability, patterns, routines, plans, suggestions, the future, whatever that is in the moment. And when you're close to someone and everything appears fine, you're more likely to be comfortable. Your guard is lowered. There might be a level of vulnerability in some ways, openness. Then when something goes wrong and someone's ripped away, then it just leaves the person that's still standing completely bare and having to try and deal with it. The impact is so much harder on someone who's much closer. At the end of the day, the closer you are to someone, the more invested you are too, the more you have to lose when things don't work out. And if it does happen, the impact is so much more damaging and painful. If you know of someone, like a colleague, stranger, and you've only known them for a few days or maybe a week, if something happens to them, you might feel sad and feel sorry for them, but it's not going to impact you as badly because you don't really know that person. You've not been around them long enough to establish some kind of bond, right? So when members of the general public say, Noah's the victim, Jack isn't whatsoever, Jack has no reason to suffer or be in pain or be on the receiving end of anything, those people are almost implying that grief isn't real and that you can't be a victim of grief, but you can on the receiving end of something. It doesn't always have to be physical or visually present. It can be something invisible. A person can be a victim of psychological controlling behavior, and that could be with words. It could be just based on body language, rejection, coldness. Silence speaks volume. That can be hurtful and harmful towards another person that cares a lot and they're not receiving much, or it's not reciprocated. The tap's cut off, the emotions are cut off. That sudden cold change, that can be psychologically damaging on another person, and it's all invisible in a way. And how it's felt, dealt with, and processed, it can be invisible. The damage that it can do, and onwards, fighting an invisible war, only they would know and feel. Everyone else around may not understand truly. So if a person says, you don't know what it's like, or I could tell you, but you still wouldn't know, it's because you have to literally go through what they're going through to ultimately know. I get that. It makes sense. But, some of the wording by people is very reckless and a little bit ignorant, but I think it's because it's to do with Jack. So, like I said earlier about the Jasmine Milan situation, admitting that Noah was murdered, and people say, yeah, we heard it, right, but you don't talk about it enough. You don't quote, you don't credit them, you don't acknowledge them. You just stick with what you think and not what a key person thinks who was actually there. Maybe because people are set in their ways and suspicious of Jasmine because of that snap in the first place. Just like how people were suspicious of Jack Newton early on. So if anything's changed with time or little adjustments have been made, If Jack is considered in any way as a level of innocence on the receiving end of badness, it's not possible to consider because Jack is only bad and will always be bad and evil, and that's it. That is the mindset of some people and an example of how people have made their minds up, and that's it. If we were talking about Caden Pressey possibly being a victim, I'm sure people would jump at that because people would say, well, Caden's had therapy or he's still going through it, so he must be a victim to something in order to be seeking therapy to try and heal and get better. Okay. Caden receiving death threats and warnings at one point. There was some outdated screenshot in the early days to do with TikTok implying to Caden supposedly that they were going to burn something down. You remember that? When people were getting emotionally close to Caden and protective, conflict of interest, and people were saying there was like 300 death threats or threats, and it was getting a bit out of hand. What's happened since? You know, Caden can be a victim to some stuff in the case, could be a victim to poor treatment, a victim to being harassed, or other people could be a victim of being lied to repeatedly, manipulated, deceived, trust broken, innocence being stripped, taken away. It happens in many different aspects. But in regard to the original aspect of with Noah, the turning point, the case itself, one victim. The investigation is open to others becoming victims at the cost and cause of recklessness of other humans that supposedly want justice or seek answers, but how they go about it is in a reckless way. It may not do much good for some people. And even those you don't like or don't get on well with, sometimes it's better to just work with the devil, even if you don't like it, for the sake of the case, for the sake of Noah. That's what people should really reflect on. If people really care about Noah, really focus on justice, then you will, to some extent, work alongside the most detestable humans you could think of, if it really mattered. I said, Dylan Brown's case, I came across some really dodgy and dark people, and I put up with them for the sake of the Dylan Brown's case. I was mistreated, lots of bad things happened, and false claims, and even some cackling goblins that came on over to this case at one point. The Kaylee individual, and how they were with me in the past, and I put up with it and so on, till the end with the case. Finished what I started. Dylan Brown's case, 28th of May 2022. I got involved, I think the 4th or the 3rd of July 2022. And I finished it April 9th, 2024, when there was a breakthrough, and I did a few more videos after that, reaching the 500 video mark. Well, now Presgrove, 2023, September 4th. I came in late of June 1st. 2023, Noah, June 2024, the first, me getting involved, and I've covered it ever since. Over 500 videos made now, and we're still going. Try and finish what one started if possible, of course. But yeah, along with coming across such problematic humans in this case, as you all know and have all documented, I've still put up with it and continued on. Even when some people probably deserve to be blocked or removed from commenting, I'll keep it public for the sake of the case and the interest of other people watching, because you never know, it might be useful or needed in the future. You never know. But referring back to, the aspect of a survivor, because let's not forget that a survivor can be a victim too. Some people don't always like addressing themselves as a victim because it feels diminishing in returns based on what they've gone through and the leaps and the steps they had to make to get better or to move on in life or move away from something which was difficult to do so. Because when there is a traumatic event, when there is a shocking loss, when there is a death in a true crime case and you're impacted by it, sometimes it can be hard to just pull away and sever ties, especially when you spent so long in building something to get somewhere with that said person. To just walk away now, even if they're not present, may feel like a betrayal on them, regardless of how they were as a person towards others and yourself, that it at least meant something to you. You held it at one point with a level of high importance and regard, which showed a level of loyalty that you had. Just cutting that loose and walking away like that is almost like being a psychopath. You can't just do that, especially if you've got empathy and a deeper connection and it's complex as well. Can't just run away or walk away. And if some people have done, they may fall back in a loop until they finally processed and finally come to some kind of inner peace, some kind of closure, with or without that other person present, and then trying from there. But the aspect of going through something bad and impactful, being a victim to that, a person who breaks from it, escapes it, avoids it, moves away, would be considered a survivor. Surviving a bad event at the cost of someone else, surviving a situation in which physically or mentally you pulled through it, or at least tried. It might not feel like you're a survivor, but the fact that you're still breathing, technically you are a survivor. A victim to something that happened in the past, but the weight carries over. But the theme of being a survivor shows a level of strength and a form of resilience, which the person should remind themselves of and be lenient of themselves, even in more complex situations where they may blame themselves in some way or feel a level of responsibility. It's about just putting that aside, putting it in a box temporarily and just focusing in on the hardest part, which they were able to pull through or try and pull through with. Moving on, but not completely neglecting the past. Making sure that the past history does not repeat itself, but also acknowledging that the past, good or bad, shocking or deep, was important and significant in some way. For it's how it's made them who they are now, and more importantly, the process in between when moving on, even more important, making them a survivor. In other words, people may not always like being called a victim because it feels diminishing on everything that they've gone through to get to where they are now. It feels like being dismissed. It feels like being denied of something, or the lack of acknowledgement, the lack of encouragement. Being called a victim could be triggering because it might bring a person back to where they once were and were once made to feel a certain way, like a victim, or around that area. And if it's more complex, where a bad person flipped the tables to make them the victim and the actual victim the bad person, then that can be triggering itself in the more complex roles. So yeah, I get why people prefer referring to themselves as a survivor, and others will call survivors survivors. The victim part can be seen as maybe disrespectful or poor taste, depending on the timing of how it's used. But I guess if it's like a criminal situation or a legal situation, you might have to use certain terms, a victim of this, a victim of that, when processing it all. But past that point, what they've gone through, what they've dealt with, where they are now, that's also important and a key strength. With the Presgrove case, with people losing a friend or a best friend, dealing with grief, dealing with questions online and people pushing and prodding and poking and being critical, dealing with all that noise and social media reminders, responses and replies, and even DMs, because who knows what goes on in the background. Who knows how many people or how many times people have DM'd Jack Newton or Jasmine Millan or any others about, did you know about this? Did you know about that? Shame on you, you're responsible. That's what probably would happen, really. If you've got an account on one of the social media pages, people will try and find you, reach out and ask questions and push and push and push. And there's a bit of controversy along the way, or tension or conflict, then it'll drive it even more and further. So it can get quite tense, and it can get a little bit, overwhelming digitally. So some people may end up deleting their accounts, and by others pushing too far, you push people underground, and then other people are denied of learning. So bridges can be burned down, but also people on the receiving end of all that noise, it doesn't do them much good. Now, if people think that they're guilty, well, then they should suffer. But Why not make them suffer at the right time? Because this moment, this time is all about trying to get the truth. Focus on that first, and then later, then they can be punished. Then there can be consequences if need be. You do the punishing too early on, you risk the truth being buried with the person if anything does happen. So emotions can run high, and it can lead to impulsive behavior. Whether you want to get the truth out of someone or a case, whether in a completely different situation, you simply want to help someone, but you do it in such a way that you're fixing them instead of supporting them, that can be overwhelming. The other person may be kind and really appreciates it, but if too forceful or too full on, because you're passionate, because you care about them or a situation, give everything you've got, give every ounce, but it might be too much. Too much passion can come across as dangerous to the other individual. So in so many different ways it can link, and other times people could be a victim or mislabeled as a victim of something. Is it a label, victimized crime, where you've been labeled as something, being responsible for a crime, a victim of a crime you never committed? You see all these different combinations. So I think people need to look back on these terms, words and definitions and so on, but when referring back at least to the loss of someone and how you can still suffer whether you're a victim or not in the moment, it can be real. And just the fact that the longer you know someone, the closer you are with them, even before anything has happened, right? Because there may be a point in time in life where a person processes a situation and thinks, this is great, this person's great, but high risk, high reward, all the boxes ticked, needs met, fine, calm, peace, all the positives. Risk, as in if you lose that person, you lose all those positives associated with it. The situation would become much more intensified in a different scenario if a person had dealt with being a victim to something in the past, or in the presence of the loss in the past. Dealing with it again, the chances, the possibilities, not guaranteed, but just considering what could go wrong. And I said, perceiving a good thing or a good person as a threat because it's not something they're used to, or it's something that they once had, and it's also something that they once lost. So like a glass vase, it gets closer and closer to the edge. Pushing it too far could go over and break and shatter. And that's how it would feel for the person's heart, more so. Maybe people are already shattered with their heart when it comes to this case, like Noah's family, but they've still got no choice but to obviously push on and fight. So they could be a victim in some ways to certain circumstances, but they're also a survivor, as in they're still here, they're still trying, and they're still fighting. It's just an observation based on what the family think can differ to what certain partygoers think. Because to some it's Noah's son, family connected by blood, they're going to push the hardest, campaign the hardest, try the hardest, fight for something. Are the partygoers fighting as well for Noah? I guess they have at one point. Would they still be now, or are they just living life? Because, sideline thing, a person may not be a victim of death, not the direct victim of something that's happened, a criminal act, an accident, but they still carry on in life carrying the weight of guilt, grief, or pain, the loss of someone. And beside the outside, it's the inside, how they could be feeling, or at times when it creeps back in the feeling. And that can be invisible. Only they know it, only they feel it. Other people about could be clueless. So there can be internal issues going on still to this day, which we may not be aware of, as to those within the case in different areas. But I think the whole victim thing seems to be a bit of a petty competition in which there can only be one and no one else can be. I think that's a bit childish. I think if you look at it critically and deeply like how I have, you can outline the extent and the depth as to how it can apply to different people within a case and just in general in life. So, with that all being said, I hope this video made sense and enough people see it. Be sure to hit the like button, thumbs up, share the video. If you're on mobile, tablet device, be sure to swipe across down below from the comments, hit the star button so the video gets put out there more, and share it with anyone you know of. Be sure to drop your comments and thoughts down below, and let me know if you agree or not with my analysis. With that all being said, I'll leave it there for now. My name's Warlight Raf. Thanks for watching. Goodbye and good night.